What's going on, everybody? You know how when a friend or somebody you know recommends a TV show, and it's a show that you weren't watching, you maybe had heard of, you weren't super aware of, or maybe you'd never even heard of it, and they recommend it and you start watching it and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that this person recommended this TV show. Or it could be a movie, or maybe you're a reader and it's a book. Whatever it is, sometimes other people are aware of things that we maybe haven't been fully exposed to. And because we haven't really been fully exposed to it or even been made aware of it, we're not able to enjoy something that we could be enjoying. And that's one of the fun things to do, is to give recommendations to friends and to receive recommendations from friends. And it's the same thing with cards. There are so many amazing cards out there that have, maybe there's some importance to the card, or there might be the image on the card, or it might be something on the back of the card. Who knows what it is? But there are great cards out there that a lot of us maybe haven't been, told about. So that's why I wanted to do my video for this week from the question I asked you last week. And the question that I asked you last week was pretty straightforward. What is a card from each of 4 decades? Pick 4 decades in which you collect. Maybe you collect 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Maybe you collect 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Whatever it is, whatever the eras are that you kind of span your collection, what is a card from each of those decades that you really think any collector that collects during that decade needs to have in their collection? And I gave the example, if you collect cards in the 80s, you really probably need to have an 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. And the results that you all put out there, a lot of the cards I was familiar with, some of the cards I wasn't familiar with, and some of the stories about the players on why you felt like the cards were worthy or needed to be in collections made a lot of sense. So what I did is I went through all of the submissions from you, and anybody who recommended a particular card. Now, some people said, oh, you got to have a card from the 71 top set. But if there was a specific card that you suggested, I did my best in compiling the list. Some of the decades have more than others. I think I got, if not all of them, most of them. And I'm going to run through those cards with you. I'm going to show you some cards that other collectors, fellow midlife community members, feel that you should have in your collection if you collect from that decade. Now, I didn't give a lot of parameters, and so some people chose very affordable cards, some people chose very expensive cards, some people chose cards of players that I didn't even know existed. And then there are some household names for sure. So that's what we're going to do here, is we're going to look through your picks for several decades of cards that you think should be in all collections for people who collect during that time. Before that, a couple of quick things. First, I am having a Whatnot sale on Wednesday. My sale will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Remember, if you're interested, great. If you're not, that's okay. I just like it because it's kind of just like a live stream. And during the live stream, I've got some stuff that I'm selling. And if you're interested, great. If you're not, that's fine. You can come hang out and just watch. You could, buy stuff. You could not show up at all. Any of it is fine. I just wanted you guys to be aware of it. After my 2-hour live stream, my buddy Dylan from Double D Vintage Baseball Cards is doing a live stream from 10 Eastern, which would be 7 Pacific, for as long as he's going to go, probably at least a couple of hours. So we're kind of doing it back to back. Thought it would be fun to do that. Mine being the intro and then his closing it out for the night. Now, also, 2 quick things I want to show you. One, ran into my friend Jim at the local card show this weekend. And Jim came up to me and said, Greg, I've got my thing for the trade. I want to trade you for one of your cards. I've got a Greg Nettles autographed picture for you. So we made the deal at the card show. That was cool to see him, and that was a super generous gift. And then in the mail, Tim, who's been a long time commenter on the channel and viewer of the channel, he sent me over some cool stuff. He sent me some Clemens cards. He sent me a couple, well, you'll see. He sent me some Clemens cards. He sent me this cool Joe Montana card. I like that a lot. That is a very cool card. What year is that from? It's from 83. Very cool. And then this cool card, he was talking about the area in Alabama that he lives. Lives very close to a lot of athletes. And famously, a lot of those athletes, were baseball players. Like Willie Mays comes from nearby. And he also said that very nearby, that Jesse Owens grew up. And it's interesting because it was cool because I didn't have Alabama on the map, so I filled in Alabama. So slowly chipping away at that. So appreciate your guys' generosity. Let's take a look at several decades and the suggestions that other YouTube, watchers, viewers, participants, creators, other midlife community members think you should have in your collection. For next week's question, T206 Cobb, any variation, 1933 Gowdy Gehrig, either version, simply because he was great, 1941 Play Ball Williams, and 1980 Topps Rickey Henderson. Okay, so let's start off with a big one. How about the T206 Ty Cobb? Now, Ty Cobb has 4 different cards in the T206 set. This is one of his 2 portraits, this one with the red background. And then, of course, there is a green background as well. Very, very similar coloring, just the only difference. And, when you think of old-time, turn-of-the-century type guys, Ty Cobb is one of the first names. And yes, his cards are pretty pricey. Now, to me, this is my favorite of the T206 Cobbs, the one with his bat on his shoulder, as opposed to the fourth and final option, which is the bat off shoulder. But yeah, Ty Cobb, how could anybody go wrong with picking up a Ty Cobb card? I begin with the assumption that we are skimming the tippy top, very most expensive cards off the top and setting those aside. For the 1930s, when Ruth and Gehrig and Gehringer traveled to Japan in the 1930s to play baseball, the most important player on the team was Mo Berg, a light-hitting catcher who was a spy. Berg's work was covert, including climbing to the top of the tallest buildings to film Tokyo. That film was used by the War Department during World War II. He spoke at least 7 languages, he received the Medal of Freedom, and is considered the most intelligent man to have ever played Major League Baseball. If Albert Einstein, James Bond, Dottie Hinson, and Uncle Sam had a love child, it would be Mo Berg. His 1933 Gowdy is a must for any pre-war collector, and it is beautiful. What is that subtle, shadowy shape in the background of his card? Oh, and the pop for Berg's card is much, much lower than the pop of any of the 4 Ruths. How cool was that story? A lot of those details I had never heard. When you think of the 30s and baseball cards, you obviously think of the 33 and 34 Gowdies. As Darren mentioned earlier, the Lou Gehrigs, the 2 Lou Gehrigs in the 33 set, very, very similar, just some slight color differences, but obviously beautiful cards. The 34 Gehrigs are also beautiful. And then was mentioned the Mo Berg. That really is a cool card. And when you consider the story that was just shared and the importance of that trip and what he accomplished, it certainly makes this a very cool card that wasn't really on my radar, but now I have to kind of reconsider that because it's pretty cool. For the 40s, I picked the beautiful, colorful 48-49 Leaf Stan Musial. Coming out of World War II, it represents the optimism of America's future. Musial was not only the best player of the 40s, but an incredibly decent man. So yeah, there were a lot of 40s cards mentioned, and some of the best cards ever are from the 40s, including the 41 Ted Williams, which was mentioned in the very first comment. This is the first Ted Williams with color, right? The 39 and 40 play balls are black and white. This one has color. A very cool card, no doubt about it. And those play ball sets are, in the early 40s, are really, some very nice sets right before World War II. And then we've got the Stan Musial right at the end of the decade. So we have the start of the decade and the end of the decade represented here. And the Stan Musial Leaf is a very cool card, no doubt about it, and one of the most important and best players ever. For the 1950s, I'd suggest 1951 Bowman Larry Doby broke the race barrier in the AL. And the 1955 Bowman Cal Hubbard, the only person enshrined in both Cooperstown and Canton. The 1959 Topps Frank Robinson also. An awesome card, especially if graded in an SGC Tux. So as was mentioned, we've got Cal Hubbard, the 55 Bowman. He made the Hall of Fame for baseball as an umpire after having a very good football career and making the Hall of Fame as a football player. So he umpired some All-Star games, some World Series games, and was one of the best umpires of his day. And then we got the 59 Frank Robinson. This would be the third Frank Robinson card. Got the cool black background. That 59 design in the circle is very cool, and his name just jumping off the page in the yellow at the top. Frank Robinson, one of the most underappreciated players, without any question, at least when it comes to the hobby. His cards are so affordable, but his numbers are incredible. And then the 51 Bowman Larry Doby, one of my favorite cards of all time. The 50 and 51 Bowman Dobies are the same pose. I have both of them, and I really, really like this card. This would be Doby's third card. His rookie cards were in the 49 sets for Leaf and Bowman. And I don't think you can go wrong getting early Larry Doby cards. I think as time goes on, I really do think there is going to be more appreciation for him moving forward. How about the 52 Topps Andy Pafko? This is the well-known first card of the 52 set. And as we all know, when rubber bands are stored around cards and you've got stacks of them, and this is the number one card, it suffered a lot of damage. And so this is a difficult card to find in a good grade, and as a result is a very expensive card and is a very well-known card. How about the 55 Harmon Killebrew? I like this pick. The Billy Ballgame made this pick, and I like it because he's kind of a forgotten slugger, and it's a historic set in having three major Hall of Famers in Killebrew, Clemente, and Koufax. And I love the way that the image just jumps off of that yellow background. And then one of the most iconic cards ever is Satchel Paige's only Topps card. The 53 Topps Satchel Paige is a beautiful card. Some people would argue this is one of the most beautiful, iconic cards in all of the 50s, if not in all of cards. Now, there were more. And I liked that some football collectors came out of the woodwork in this exercise. Jim Brown's rookie card from the 58 Topps set is to me, this is the Grail football card. There are some other very well-known football cards, some of which we will be seeing later on in the video. And when you're talking about old-time football players and defensive players that were monsters and hit hard, none other than Chuck Bednarik is one of the hardest hitting and best defensive players of his time. A lot of the top all-time lists, you would find his name. And then the 57 Topps Tony Kubek. Now, the Kubek is a very cool card. Now, this wasn't on my radar. A lot of these cards, when I read them, I could picture them, I couldn't picture this Tony Kubek until I saw it, and then I recognized it, and it is a very cool looking card of a very good Yankee player. Now, how about the 58 Topps World Series batting foes? I mean, you got the World Series bunting going in the background. You've got Mantle and Mays, two of the best, if not the two best players from the 50s. Now, obviously, Willie Mays and some others are in the discussion as well. But two of the very best on the same card in an era where they just started doing multiplayer cards. How about the 58 All-Star Stan Musial? This is very well known as being Stan Musial's first Topps card. I love it because it's the first year that Topps did All-Star cards, and why not include a guy that doesn't have a Topps card before that? I love the blue and the red backgrounds of the two different leagues and the stars. Absolutely love it. And then a very popular card, the Ted Kluszewski, where he's got no sleeves, and that he just looks like a monster with those no sleeves. So the 57 Topps Ted Kluszewski is the last card that was mentioned out of all the cards from the 1950s for, obvious reasons. The 1960s needs two cards to reflect the decade. The 67 Topps Rick Monday and the 69 Doc Ellis. Both are rookie cards, and both have interesting stories for very different reasons. Now, a couple of names that I wasn't expecting to see, but when you see the cards, they are cool-looking cards, and there are stories that go with them. Doc Ellis famously pitched a no-hitter and claims he was under the influence of LSD at the time, battled drug use his whole career, and says that he never pitched when he wasn't using drugs. Ended up passing away of a liver disease as a result, probably. And then Rick Monday, he is a guy that you probably may not remember his name, but you probably remember the images of him preventing an American flag from getting burned and running over and stopping that incident from happening. And then the 69 Johnny Bench, a youthful Johnny Bench with the Rookie Cup. This is definitely one of the iconic cards from the 1960s. I love it, and it's so much of a better card than his rookie card from the 68 set, at least from eye appeal from my perspective. How about Bob Uecker? Such a likable and well-known guy, more off the field than not as a player. But and even here, it's funny because he's set up left-handed, even though he hits right-handed. That's just kind of the jokester that he is. And then how about the 62 Roger Maris? The card that on the back has the record-breaking single-season home run numbers on it, when stats on the back of cards were one of the focal points of cards. And seeing him in a Yankee uniform is always fun, as there aren't a ton of Maris cards where he's in a Yankee uniform. And then we've got the Nolan Ryan. I mean, the Nolan Ryan rookie is one of the most iconic cards of all time. So the 68 Topps Nolan Ryan, I understand why that one would make the list. It's a bit of a pricey one, but we are hitting a lot of different price points, from cards that are $1 or $2 all the way up to thousands and thousands in this. And this is, an expensive one, but certainly has to be at least mentioned, right? And then the 64 Topps Pete Rose. To me, the best looking Pete Rose card, his second card with the Rookie Cup after the floating head rookie card in the previous year. This is such a great looking card. And then another 68 rookie. How about the Johnny Bench with his hat on backwards? A very, very young guy. We forget how young he was when he started, and a lot of us remember him and how he looked at the end of his career. But these pictures from the 68 and 69 sets are ones that remind us of just how youthful he was, which I love that about cards, is the pictures and the images that they capture. Speaking of the floating head Pete Rose, I mean, you have to admit, whether you love the card or don't love the card, or you love Pete Rose or don't like Pete Rose, this is a very, very recognizable and famous card. And when thinking of the 60s, there are not many cards that would be more recognizable than that one. And then a Joe Namath rookie card, the 65 Joe Namath in the tall boy style. This is a very expensive card. It's funny because Joe Namath, stat-wise, doesn't hold up with guys like Brady or Montana or Otto Graham. But, the cool factor's off the charts, right? And then the George Blanda, this is going to be a much more affordable card, and this is much later in his career. He's about 10 years into his career at this point. And George Blanda, another quarterback who made the rounds and played for such a long time. And so that brings us, we're starting to wind down here into the last couple of cards of the 60s. But how about the 1965 batting leaders in the 1966 set that has Clemente, Aaron, and Mays? Three all-time great outfielders, all-time great hitters. What a card. And then the other choice that was mentioned, the last choice mentioned from the 60s, is the 64 tops in the NL card with Mays and Aaron. I'm telling you, these multiplayer cards are still very affordable, and they're very, very cool. And we've seen several of them already. For the 1970s, I chose the 74 tops, number 1, Hank Aaron, new all-time home run king. No collection can be complete without this card. All time still stands, no steroids included. Skipping a decade, I finally have to choose the 97 Zenith, number 20, the Ken Griffey Jr. card that illustrates easily one of the most beautifully powerful swings of one of the most iconic players of a more recent era, launching the leather sphere into, I'm sure, one of the far reaches of the stadium where no player will ever be able to catch it. Just a phenomenal photo of a phenomenal player. So jumping now into the 70s, one of the names mentioned, how could you not mention the Mike Schmidt rookie? One of the more famous rookie cards, one of the best rookie cards from the 1970s. Mike Schmidt, probably, arguably, the best third baseman of all time. Good defensively, and obviously as a hitter was unbelievable. And his rookie card is one that I think most people would want from the 73 set. Speaking of 70 rookie cards, how about the 75 George Brett? The colors are outstanding in the set, making them very difficult to find in good condition, though. But this George Brett card is a fairly expensive card. It's clearly the most expensive card from the set. And then the 71 set features a very cool, probably the best looking and best Thurman Munson card as he's making a play at the plate. Again, the Rookie Cup is a very common theme throughout this video. There's just something about those cards that have the Rookie Cup on them, especially when we're talking about some of these all-time greats, that makes it very, very cool. Continuing on with the 70s, we've got the 72 Clemente. I don't know. I love the yellow batting, or the yellow helmet. That helps make the card for me. He's just kind of hanging out, just tossing a ball to himself. Such a likable person, such a likable card. How about the last Willie Mays card from the 73 set in the Mets uniform? Sometimes people forget that he, didn't finish his career with the Giants. He had that very final stretch there with the Mets. And, a few players did that. Same with Hank Aaron. So another football sighting, this time the 76 Walter Payton rookie card. And, when you think of all-time running backs, a lot of people think of him. He's certainly in the conversation, if not the best. Obviously passing at a young age adds to kind of the lore about him. But that is such a big rookie card from the 1970s. We got another football card. How about Terry Bradshaw? This guy was a winner. He just won and won and won. And, one of the things about Terry Bradshaw and his cards is he's still relevant, being on TV every Sunday and such a larger-than-life character. I think that definitely adds to his appeal and the, how broad he is collected. And then one of the most popular players from one of the most popular teams, the Roger Staubach rookie. I had this card at one point for a while, and it's a tough card to get. The centering in this year is brutal. And then you got this very cool 1976 Johnny Bench card where there's a cloud of dust. I mean, that's how I remember Johnny Bench. He's got the catcher helmet on. He's got the high shin guards, and there was some sort of play at the plate. People don't forget about how good not just was Johnny Bench as a hitter, but also as a defender. Now, we got a 1975 Mel Blount. Now, this card cracks me up. It looks to me like he's on a farm, like in the middle of a pasture, yet he's crouched down like he's about to make a tackle. And that is such an interesting card and such a cool pick. And then we've got a famous guy as a manager. He played as well, but he's more famous as a manager. And that would be this Billy Martin card from the 72 set. And I've heard people talk about this 77 Mark Friedrich card before. And it's interesting. It's got the rookie cut, but it's just such an youthful card of this guy. It shows some excitement. That's a popular card, even though, it's not a household name. And then we've got the 79 Ozzie Smith. I mean, when you're talking about shortstops from the 80s, you're probably thinking about Ozzie Smith. He was in the All-Star game pretty much every year. Probably the best defensive I think certainly the best defensive shortstop of all time. Another hard card to get centered. And then we look at this very, very cool 74 Topps Hank Aaron as the new home run king. It is the number one card in the 74 Topps set, and it really is a cool card. And, it's not crazy expensive. Now, to find it in high grade, it gets pretty expensive. But it is a very cool card. I certainly could understand wanting to have one of those in my collection. And how about the 75 Topps Oscar Gamble? That guy's hair. The 76 card, his hair is equally as impressive. But that's almost like a time capsule, that haircut. 1980s, the 1985 Topps Mark McGwire Team USA. It was the card to get during the home run chase and is extremely affordable these days. Now, when we talk about the 1980s, you can't go too far without talking about the 86 Donruss Jose Canseco. That rated rookie card was the card in 1987 and 88. And, I mean, it's in the midlife logo for a reason, because if you are a midlifer like me, that was a card that you wanted badly as a kid. And speaking of cards we wanted badly as a kid, how about the 89 Fleer Bill Ripken? Now, these 80s cards are nostalgia overload for me. As I was going through everybody's picks and suggestions, I couldn't believe I could remember myself looking at these cards at card shops and card shows, one after another. Like the Mark McGwire, the 85 Topps Mark McGwire Olympic card. I mean, such a cool card. I bought one of these, maybe 3 or 4 years ago in a PSA 8 holder. I think I paid like $11 shipped. I mean, this card was very expensive during the Sosa McGwire home run chase. And, when you think about the 1980s, I mean, I think the iconic card would be the 1980 Topps Rickey Henderson. I mean, the best leadoff hitter of all time, the best base stealer at all time, the amount of walks he has, the number of runs that he scored. I mean, the guy was a machine. And part of what adds to that card is the fact that he's got the yellow top, the yellow jersey on, I think is very cool. And then the 89 Upper Deck, the card that changed it all, really the 89 Upper Deck, I think changed the future of baseball cards and sports cards. We went away from a cheaper paper quality to a much higher durable paper and a gloss. And, it was a game changer. And then the 84 Don Mattingly. You know, when you think of the 1980s and you think about hitters, you think about Don Mattingly. He was as famous as there was, as good a hitter as there was through the 80s, and that 84 Topps card was a card we all wanted for sure. And then when football cards really boomed in 89 and Score and Pro Set came out, the 89 Pro Set Barry Sanders was a very big card. And I mean, at the time, there were others. The Thurman Thomas, the Troy Aikman, the Deion Sanders from that set. Such a cool set, that 89 Score set. And then the best football player of all time in my eyes, although I am a 49er fan, is Jerry Rice and his 86 Topps. The green border just kind of adds to the card because it just makes it that much harder to find a good copy with how much chipping and how much it gets exposed from that green. How about the 82 Lawrence Taylor? It's so iconic and ironic, really, that he's sitting there kind of thinking. And, what he had to think about for years to come as his life really was, all over the place. But on the field, I personally had never seen a defensive player take over a game like Lawrence Taylor. And in the 1988 Topps, when baseball cards were absolutely bonkers, the guy that was in all the headlines was Jose Canseco. So the 88 Topps. As you said 4 decades, I'll step forward to the 1990s and the 1990 Score Bono's card. It is part of the regular set, but still feels like a chase or insert card of much later. When you think of the early 90s and you think of baseball and football, you have to think about Bo Jackson. And, all of the marketing campaigns that were going on with Bo Jackson, this card just sums it all up. And the 90 Score Bono's card was an awesome card. It's still an awesome card. And I'm excited that I have one. Now, a card that was not on my radar when I started reading over these submissions was the 97 Zenith Ken Griffey Jr. card. I don't know if I had ever seen the card. I don't know if I was aware of the card. But the moment I looked this card up after somebody listed it as a card, I had to have it. So here's my question. Is there a card that you just saw featured, that somebody else recommended, that you're like, I've got to have it. I need to have that card. That card is now on my list, and it wasn't on my list before. Is there a card? And if so, in the comments, tell me which card or cards that were kind of off your radar, and they just moved onto your radar based on these recommendations. And yeah, you got to have it. I mean, I literally, as I was putting this together, I literally immediately got on eBay and I bought that Ken Griffey Jr. Zenith card. I'm like, I need to have this card. This card is fantastic. And I bought it. So I can tell you for sure, for me, I took one of these recommendations and immediately got involved. That is a beautiful card. Had to have it. Bought it right there on the spot. Now, that is my question for the comments below. The other thing I want to hear from you in the comments below is about this week's question. So my question to all of you for this coming week is as follows. What's the card that got away? Either the one you missed out on or the one that you had and you wished you hadn't let it go. I mean, there are probably times that we've all been close to making a purchase and we decided against it and we wish that we had actually done it. And a lot of us have cards that were in our collection that we moved on from our collection and we wish that we hadn't. Tell me about the card that got away in either of those two circumstances. Appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate your comments. Interested to hear about those stories. And I'm interested to hear what new cards entered your radar are now a target for you that weren't before you started watching.